Seasonal shelters open temporarily during the winter months, providing a warm and a safe place for people experiencing homelessness.
Last year, we told you about the challenges caused by a lack of seasonal shelters across the community. And this year, News 5's Nadine Abasada is following through after a local organization found a more permanent solution.
Right now, in one of the richest countries on earth, hundreds of thousands of people are losing their jobs, their homes, and their future, and ending up living in RVs, vans, and parking lots. This isn't happening somewhere far away. It's happening in your city, on your street, maybe even to someone you know. And what's driving this crisis in 2026 is far more disturbing than most people realize. In 2025 and early 2026, America experienced one of the most devastating waves of job losses since the Great Recession. More than 820,000 workers were laid off across technology, retail, logistics, manufacturing, healthcare, and media sectors. Major corporations downsized operations, warehouses introduced automation, delivery routes were eliminated, and remote positions vanished overnight. For the majority of these workers, severance packages lasted only a few weeks before income stopped completely. Labor reports revealed a disturbing trend. Nearly 48% of workers laid off in 2025 remained unemployed for more than 6 months. This extended joblessness proved financially catastrophic. The average American household maintains less than $6,000 in emergency savings, while monthly expenses typically exceed $4,500. Simple mathematics showed most families exhausted their reserves in under 60 days. When unemployment benefits expired, rent payments became impossible. Eviction filings surged by 37% in major metropolitan areas between late 2025 and mid-2026. Thousands of families were forced from their homes with minimal warning. Many possessed decent credit histories and stable employment records until a single corporate decision eliminated everything. With emergency shelters operating beyond capacity and rental housing financially unreachable, displaced workers turned to used RVs, vans, and campers as emergency shelter. Some spent their final savings purchasing vehicles just to avoid sleeping outdoors. Others moved into deteriorating trailers already parked on city streets. What began as temporary survival strategy became long-term displacement. These corporate layoffs didn't simply eliminate employment opportunities, they triggered a catastrophic domino effect. Job loss, missed rent payments, eviction proceedings, vehicle living, and ultimately homelessness, all occurring within just a few months. Before the massive layoffs even began, millions of Americans were already living on an economic knife's edge. Surveys conducted in 2024 showed that 63% of working adults were living paycheck to paycheck. Their monthly income barely covered rent, food, transportation, insurance, and utilities, with virtually nothing remaining for savings or emergencies. By 2026, inflation had dramatically increased living costs. Grocery expenses rose by nearly 22%. Car insurance premiums jumped 28%, and electricity bills increased 19% in many states. Meanwhile, average wages rose less than 4% annually. The financial mathematics simply stopped working for ordinary families. Households were spending more every month while earning approximately the same income. Missing even one paycheck now meant immediate financial crisis. Late fees, overdraft charges, and credit card interest accumulated rapidly. A single unexpected medical bill could completely eliminate remaining savings. Studies demonstrated that 41% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without borrowing money. Once rent payments were delayed, landlords moved aggressively. Many states had shortened eviction timelines to as little as 21 days. Tenants rarely had sufficient time to recover financially. One late payment became a court notice. One court notice became forced removal. For thousands of workers, job loss didn't gradually lead to poverty. It caused instant financial collapse. Within weeks, previously stable households became homeless. Many never imagined they would be sleeping in parking lots or industrial zones. But when the regular paycheck stopped arriving, the social safety net simply wasn't there to catch them. Economic security evaporated overnight. Between 2021 and 2026, the American housing market underwent a historic transformation. Average rent nationwide rose by more than 34%, with some metropolitan areas experiencing increases exceeding 45%. Cities like Phoenix, Tampa, Austin, and Denver became financially unaffordable almost overnight for working families. In 2026, the average one-bedroom apartment in many urban regions cost $1,700 to $2,200 monthly. Two-bedroom units regularly exceeded $2,500 per month. Meanwhile, median take-home pay for many workers remained under $3,800 monthly. This meant rent alone consumed over half of household income before any other expenses. Financial experts traditionally recommend spending no more than 30% of income on housing costs. By 2026, over 52% of renters were paying more than 40% of their income toward housing. Many were paying over 60%, leaving almost nothing for food, transportation, healthcare, and other basic necessities. Corporate landlords and private equity investment firms accelerated this affordability crisis. Large investment groups purchased thousands of rental properties, aggressively raised rents, reduced maintenance services, and added hidden fees. Individual tenants had virtually no bargaining power against these massive corporations. Waiting lists for affordable housing programs exploded in length. In some states, Section 8 waiting lists stretched beyond 8 years. Public housing units declined in number, while demand surged dramatically. As rents climbed faster than wages, traditional housing became financially unreachable for millions of working Americans. RVs, vans, and trailers became the only affordable housing option remaining. For many families, vehicle living wasn't a lifestyle choice or adventure. It was the last financial shelter available. By 2026, RVs had quietly replaced traditional apartments for tens of thousands of displaced Americans. Used campers, travel trailers, and converted vans became emergency housing units for families in crisis. People were no longer purchasing RVs for weekend vacations or retirement adventures. They were buying them simply to survive. The average used RV price jumped dramatically from $12,000 in 2021 to nearly $28,000 in 2026, driven by desperate demand from displaced families. Even broken-down trailers with significant mechanical problems sold for thousands of dollars. Many families spent their final savings just to secure a roof over their heads. RVs offered certain advantages that emergency shelters couldn't provide: privacy, security, and mobility. Traditional shelters were dangerously overcrowded, often unsafe, and frequently separated family members. Many required nightly check-ins and enforced strict curfews. RV living allowed people to keep their pets, personal belongings, and human dignity intact. However, RV ownership came with substantial hidden costs. Fuel, insurance premiums, repairs, propane, vehicle registration, and parking fees typically added up to $600 to $1,200 monthly. Without stable income, even supposedly cheap living remained financially precarious and risky. Most RV dwellers had no legal place to park overnight. They constantly rotated between industrial zones, retail parking lots, and residential side streets. The persistent fear of parking tickets and vehicle towing became part of daily survival routines. Over time, what began as temporary vehicle living became permanent housing status. People carefully planned driving routes, charging station locations, and water refill spots. America had inadvertently created an entire mobile housing class, citizens surviving in vehicles because traditional housing systems had completely failed them. One of the most tragic aspects of America's RV homelessness crisis is its devastating impact on senior citizens. By 2026, more than 18% of RV dwellers were over age 55, according to housing advocacy organizations. Many were retired workers, disabled individuals, or people living on fixed government incomes. The average Social Security payment in 2026 was approximately $1,860 monthly. This amount barely covered basic rent in most American cities. After paying for prescription medications, health insurance premiums, and utility bills, many seniors had virtually nothing remaining for food or other necessities. Rising property taxes, homeowners association fees, and maintenance costs pushed older homeowners from houses they'd lived in for decades. Reverse mortgages gradually drained accumulated equity. Medical debt destroyed lifetime savings. A single extended hospital stay could eliminate decades of financial stability. With few realistic employment options available, seniors increasingly turned to RVs as retirement housing solutions. Many purchased old trailers for under $10,000 and parked them wherever local authorities permitted. Others inherited vehicles from deceased relatives or adult children. Living in an RV at 65 or 70 years old comes with serious health and safety risks. Extreme heat exposure, dangerous cold, limited healthcare access, and social isolation significantly increased mortality rates among elderly vehicle dwellers. Studies showed that homeless seniors are 3 times more likely to die prematurely than housed retirees. These weren't irresponsible people who made poor life choices. They worked for decades, paid taxes faithfully, and followed all the established rules. Yet the American system completely abandoned them in their final years. RV living became their last remaining safety net, not retirement freedom, but desperate survival. By 2026, a growing proportion of RV homeless were no longer unemployed. They were working full-time jobs, yet still remained homeless. Surveys from urban outreach programs showed that nearly 44% of vehicle dwellers maintained steady employment in retail, warehouses, hospitals, food service, and delivery services. Many worked night shifts, then slept in parking lots during daytime hours. Others constantly rotated between industrial parks and transit hubs seeking safe overnight parking. Large retail chains became unofficial housing zones, with dozens of RVs regularly lining back parking lot entrances. Despite earning $15 to $22 hourly, these workers couldn't qualify for apartment rentals. Most landlords required monthly income equal to 3 times the rent amount, plus strong credit scores and security deposits exceeding $3,000. One single missed payment appearing on their rental history was sufficient to permanently disqualify them. Employers often didn't know their workers were homeless. Many employees hid their living situations out of shame and fear of losing employment. Some showered at commercial gyms. Others washed in public restrooms at libraries or gas stations. Living in vehicles significantly affected work performance. Lack of quality sleep, constant environmental noise, and persistent fear of police harassment reduced productivity levels. Studies showed that working homeless individuals missed 23% more shifts than housed co-workers. This created a vicious economic cycle. Housing instability made maintaining employment harder. Employment instability made securing housing impossible. The American economy was creating workers who could sustain business operations but couldn't sustain their own lives. These employees generated corporate profits while sleeping in parking lots, representing a fundamental failure of the economic system itself. As RV homelessness expanded across America, many cities responded with legal restrictions instead of actual solutions. By mid-2026, over 140 United States cities had passed or significantly strengthened laws banning overnight vehicle sleeping within city limits. These municipal ordinances included strict time limits, complex permit systems, and exclusion zones near schools, parks, and business districts. Some cities limited parking duration to 2 to 4 hours overnight, making rest physically impossible for vehicle dwellers. Parking violation fines ranged from $75 to $500 per citation. Multiple tickets could lead to arrest warrants. For homeless individuals already struggling financially, unpaid fines quickly became permanent criminal records. Some municipalities installed physical barriers including concrete blocks, chain link fencing, and aggressive no parking signage specifically designed to push RVs out of neighborhoods. Others deployed license plate scanning technology to track repeat offenders and target enforcement. Safe parking programs existed in limited areas, but demand far exceeded available supply. In California, for example, fewer than 12% of program applicants received access to legal overnight parking lots. Without legal places to park safely, RV dwellers were forced into constant movement. Many drove hundreds of miles monthly just to avoid enforcement zones. This dramatically increased fuel costs and accelerated vehicle deterioration. Instead of reducing actual homelessness numbers, these municipal bans simply made poverty invisible. People were systematically pushed into remote areas, desert regions, and abandoned roads, places with no public services, no security infrastructure, and no emergency support systems available. The homeless population didn't disappear. It just moved beyond public view, often into increasingly dangerous locations where survival became even more difficult, and authorities conveniently didn't have to witness the crisis. One of the fastest ways homeless people lost absolutely everything was through municipal vehicle towing policies. When an RV accumulated multiple parking tickets, cities authorized immediate impoundment. No advance warning, no appeals process, no second chances. Towing an RV typically cost $800 to $1,500 initially. Daily storage fees added another $75 to $150. Within just 2 weeks, total accumulated fees could easily exceed $3,000, far more than most homeless people could ever realistically pay. Now, if the owner couldn't recover their vehicle by paying all fees, it was sold at public auction or scrapped for parts. All personal belongings stored inside, clothing, important documents, family photographs, identification, were often destroyed without inventory or return opportunity. Advocacy groups estimated that during 2025 to 2026, over 58,000 RVs and vans were impounded nationwide from homeless owners who couldn't pay recovery fees. Many impoundments occurred while people were at work or attending medical appointments. Returning to discover their entire home had vanished, caused immediate severe psychological trauma and renewed crisis. After losing their RV, most people fell directly into street homelessness. Emergency shelters were rarely available. Rebuilding financial stability from absolute zero became nearly impossible without housing. Some cities actively relied on towing revenue to fund enforcement operations. This created perverse financial incentives to remove vehicles rather than assist displaced residents. Towing policies didn't solve homelessness. They systematically erased fragile stability. They transformed precarious survival situations into complete catastrophic collapse. A person living in an RV might be struggling but still maintaining employment, accessing healthcare, and preserving basic dignity. Once that vehicle was impounded and lost forever, they faced total destitution. The policy effectively punished poverty itself rather than addressing its root causes. Keeping an RV legally compliant became increasingly difficult throughout 2026. Vehicle registration fees, emissions testing requirements, and insurance premiums all rose sharply, creating additional barriers for homeless vehicle dwellers. Average RV insurance costs reached $900 to $1,600 annually, depending on state regulations and coverage levels. Registration and mandatory inspection fees added another $300 to $600 yearly. For people already struggling to purchase food, these additional costs were completely impossible to manage. Many fell behind on payments and became classified as unregistered vehicles. Once registration expired, police had full legal grounds for issuing tickets and authorizing towing. Mandatory repair requirements created another significant barrier. Cracked windshields, brake system issues, or electrical problems could result in legal citations. Professional repairs often cost $1,000 or more, placing them far beyond financial reach. Without valid insurance, people couldn't legally drive their vehicles. Without driving capability, they couldn't relocate for employment opportunities. Without movement options, they were targeted for parking violations. Some states suspended driver's licenses over unpaid traffic fines, trapping people in impossible legal limbo. Driving became illegal, yet remaining parked also violated local ordinances. This created a bureaucratic trap where people were systematically punished for being poor. Administrative regulations originally designed for stable-housed households became effective weapons against displaced populations. The cycle became inescapable. Without money, people couldn't maintain legal compliance. Without legal compliance, they faced fines and penalties. Without ability to pay fines, they lost vehicles and became street homeless. Every requirement designed to ensure public safety inadvertently pushed vulnerable people further into crisis. The system wasn't helping people escape poverty. It was actively accelerating their descent into complete destitution. As RV living increased dramatically, commercial campgrounds raised prices aggressively. What previously cost $25 per night became $60, $80, or even $120 in popular regions and tourist destinations. Monthly campground rates often exceeded $1,200 to $1,800, effectively rivaling traditional apartment rent costs. Many commercial parks added substantial extra fees for electricity usage, water access, and pet accommodation. Private equity investment firms purchased major campground chains and focused operations exclusively on luxury RV tourism markets. Long-term residents struggling financially were systematically pushed out in favor of short-term vacationers with higher spending capacity. Public campgrounds implemented strict stay limits of 7 to 14 days maximum, forcing constant relocation. National forest dispersed camping regulations were tightened due to overcrowding and environmental concerns. Low-income RV dwellers were left with virtually nowhere affordable to park legally. Free boondocking spots filled completely. Informal RV communities were dismantled by authorities. Some homeless families spent over 40% of their monthly income just on temporary parking spaces. When money inevitably ran out, they returned to illegal street parking and enforcement cycles. The widespread assumption that you can always stay affordably in a campground became completely mythical. In 2026, campgrounds were no longer a safety net for struggling Americans. They were another closed door. The commercialization of campgrounds eliminated one of the last affordable options for vehicle dwellers. What was once a budget-friendly solution became just another profit center. People who purchased RVs specifically because they couldn't afford apartments now discovered they couldn't afford campgrounds either. The promised escape from high housing costs proved illusory. Instead of finding affordable shelter, they found themselves trapped between expensive campgrounds they couldn't access and illegal street parking that invited constant harassment and fines. By 2026, access to basic healthcare had become one of the biggest survival threats facing RV homeless individuals. Without stable physical addresses, many lost established primary care doctors and health insurance coverage. Nearly 38% of vehicle dwellers reported being completely uninsured or severely underinsured. Routine preventive care disappeared first. Blood pressure monitoring, diabetes management, and cancer screenings were indefinitely postponed. Mobile health clinics were completely overwhelmed by demand. In some cities, appointment wait times exceeded 6 months for basic services. Emergency rooms became the default healthcare system for homeless populations. ER visits among vehicle dwellers increased by 41% between 2023 and 2026. These visits were extraordinarily expensive, frequently chaotic, and rarely followed by proper ongoing treatment. Prescription medication costs created another significant barrier. Even with discount pharmacy programs, many essential medications cost $50 to $200 monthly. People routinely rationed insulin, heart medications, and antidepressants to stretch limited supplies. Living conditions inside vehicles directly worsened health outcomes. Extreme temperatures reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit in summer and near freezing in winter months. Mold growth, poor ventilation, and limited sanitation dramatically increased respiratory infections. Untreated medical illness reduced work capacity and productivity. Many people lost jobs due to excessive medical absences. Health problems became a direct pathway into deeper homelessness and disability. The healthcare system fundamentally shifted from disease prevention to crisis management, treating people only when they were already breaking down physically. This approach proved far more expensive while producing worse outcomes. Vehicle dwellers faced a cruel choice: spend limited money on parking and food, or spend it on healthcare they desperately needed. Most chose immediate survival, allowing chronic conditions to worsen until they required emergency intervention. By 2026, thousands of American families were raising children inside RVs, vans, and converted buses. School district surveys showed that more than 320,000 students nationwide were officially classified as vehicle-housed or homeless. Parents worked multiple jobs simultaneously, yet still couldn't afford traditional housing. Many deliberately hid their living situations from schools to avoid child welfare investigations and potential family separation. Children completed homework assignments under flashlight beams after dark. Internet access depended entirely on parking near public libraries or fast food restaurants offering free Wi-Fi. Extremely limited living space caused constant family stress and conflict. Nutrition suffered dramatically. Families relied heavily on canned food and fast food rather than fresh, healthy meals. Studies found that homeless children were 2.5 times more likely to experience malnutrition and related developmental problems. Sleep disruptions significantly affected learning capacity. Frequent relocations caused chronic school absenteeism. Homeless students were 4 times more likely to drop out of high school before graduation. Mental health impacts were severe and long-lasting. Anxiety disorders, clinical depression, and behavioral disorders increased sharply among displaced youth populations. Despite these enormous obstacles, many families fought desperately to maintain some appearance of normalcy. Parents sacrificed everything available to keep children enrolled in school and participating in activities. Mobile poverty created an entire generation growing up without stability, security, or predictability, fundamentally shaping their future prospects long before reaching adulthood. These children learned that hard work doesn't guarantee housing, that families can lose everything overnight, and that the American dream is increasingly out of reach. The psychological scars and lost educational opportunities would follow them for decades, perpetuating cycles of poverty into the next generation. Instead of addressing root causes of homelessness, many American cities criminalized poverty itself. By 2026, more than 60% of major United States cities used law enforcement as their primary homelessness response strategy. Common legal violations included unauthorized camping, vehicle habitation, and public nuisance charges. Each citation added fines between $50 and $300 to already impossible financial burdens. Failure to pay accumulated fines led to arrest warrants. Warrants led to jail bookings. Arrests created permanent criminal records, effectively blocking future housing applications and employment opportunities. In Los Angeles alone, over 120,000 homelessness-related citations were issued during 2025. Similar enforcement patterns appeared in cities nationwide. Police departments spent millions on homelessness enforcement operations. In some cities, over $40,000 per person annually was spent cycling individuals repeatedly through jail, court systems, and emergency hospitals. Property confiscation policies removed tents, portable generators, and essential personal belongings. Rebuilding after confiscation took months of effort and scarce resources. This enforcement system systematically punished basic survival behaviors. Sleeping, cooking food, charging phones, fundamental human needs became prosecutable criminal acts. Criminal records transformed temporary economic hardship into permanent social exclusion. Poverty became a legal status, not merely an economic condition. The criminalization approach failed to reduce homelessness numbers while consuming enormous public resources. Instead of helping people access housing, employment, and services, cities spent millions arresting and prosecuting them for being poor. Each citation made escaping homelessness harder. Each arrest created barriers to future stability. The system wasn't designed to solve homelessness. It was designed to make homeless people invisible, pushing them out of sight while ensuring they could never recover economically. Punishment replaced assistance, and the crisis continued growing. Living without housing stability created intense and sustained psychological strain. Mental health screenings showed that over 62% of RV homeless adults experienced severe anxiety disorders or clinical depression. Constant uncertainty triggered chronic stress responses. Fear of vehicle towing, police harassment, and weather emergencies never stopped. The human nervous system wasn't designed for perpetual crisis mode. Substance abuse increased dramatically as healthy coping mechanisms failed. Overdose death rates among vehicle dwellers rose by 29% from 2023 to 2026. Sleep deprivation was widespread and debilitating. Environmental noise, security lights, and police patrols constantly disrupted rest. Poor sleep quality worsened emotional regulation and decision-making capacity. Social isolation deepened over time. Many people avoided friends and family due to overwhelming shame about their circumstances. Support networks gradually collapsed. Suicide prevention hotlines reported increased calls from people living in vehicles. In some regions, suicide attempts rose by 18% among homeless populations. Untreated mental illness made job retention significantly harder. Job loss increased housing instability. The vicious cycle repeated endlessly. Without accessible mental health counseling, psychological trauma accumulated continuously. Immediate survival replaced long-term planning capacity. Many people stopped imagining any future beyond the next week. The mental health crisis among vehicle dwellers represented a predictable consequence of sustained stress, trauma, and deprivation. When people lack safety, stability, and hope, psychological breakdown becomes inevitable. Yet mental health services remained inaccessible to those who needed them most desperately. Insurance requirements, wait lists, transportation barriers, and costs created insurmountable obstacles. The system failed to recognize that housing itself is mental health treatment, that stability enables recovery while homelessness guarantees deterioration. Without intervention, this mental health crisis would only deepen. Housing assistance programs were completely overwhelmed by demand. By 2026, Section 8 waiting lists exceeded 2.4 million applicants nationwide, representing years of accumulation. Average wait times reached 5 to 10 years before receiving any housing assistance. Many applicants died, relocated, or simply gave up before ever receiving help. Emergency shelters operated at over 110% of designed capacity. Turnaway rates climbed to record levels, with thousands rejected nightly. Federal housing budgets failed to keep pace with escalating demand. Adjusted for inflation, funding actually declined by 14% since 2019. Local nonprofit organizations relied on unstable donation streams. Many closed permanently due to staff burnout and funding shortages. Temporary hotel housing programs introduced during COVID-19 were discontinued, removing over 150,000 emergency beds from availability. Social service caseworkers managed impossible caseloads of 80 to 120 clients each, making effective individualized support impossible. The social safety net existed on paper and in political rhetoric, not in practical reality. People fell through gaps that were growing wider every year. The disconnect between program existence and program effectiveness became stark. Politicians pointed to housing assistance programs as proof of government action. Meanwhile, millions of people remained on waiting lists for years without help. Emergency shelters turned away desperate families nightly. Nonprofits collapsed under overwhelming demand. The programs were real, but they were catastrophically underfunded and understaffed. They provided enough assistance to claim the problem was being addressed, but nowhere near enough to actually solve it. This created a dangerous illusion, the appearance of a safety net that, in practice, caught almost nobody. Most people in crisis discovered that government assistance existed in name only. If current trends continue without intervention, analysts project that vehicle homelessness could exceed 1.5 million people by 2030, representing exponential growth. Workplace automation, artificial intelligence displacement, and climate-related disasters threaten millions of additional jobs. Meanwhile, housing construction remains far below population demand. Without significant policy reform, RV communities will expand into permanent settlements. Informal mobile slums will grow outside city limits nationwide. Public health risks will multiply dangerously. Disease outbreaks, heat-related deaths, and untreated chronic illnesses will rise dramatically. Social trust will continue eroding. More citizens will view basic survival as illegal activity. Democratic institutions will lose public legitimacy. Children raised in persistent instability will enter adulthood without security foundations. Intergenerational poverty cycles will deepen and expand. The homelessness crisis will no longer remain hidden from public view. It will fundamentally shape American politics, economics, and public life. This isn't a temporary emergency requiring short-term responses. It represents a structural collapse happening in slow motion, unless decisive action is taken immediately. The choice facing America is clear. Either implement systemic solutions addressing housing affordability, wage stagnation, and social services, or accept permanent expansion of vehicle homelessness as the new normal. Half measures and enforcement-only approaches have already failed. The crisis demands comprehensive reform, affordable housing construction, living wage requirements, healthcare access, and robust social support systems. Without these changes, vehicle homelessness will continue growing until it becomes undeniable and unmanageable. The question isn't whether America can afford solutions. It's whether America can afford the consequences of continued inaction.
Our team coverage continues now with U.S. Supreme Court ruling cities can arrest and fine those who are homeless if they sleep outside. The High Court handing down that ruling today, siding with the town of Grants Pass, Oregon, and its anti-camping ordinances.
Right now, in one of the richest countries in the world, working families are being pushed out of their homes and into parking lots, and now even those are being taken away. This isn't a housing shortage anymore. It's a survival crisis, and it's spreading faster than anyone wants to admit. California has become ground zero for RV homelessness enforcement in America. With over 180,000 unhoused residents and an estimated 72,000 people living in vehicles, the state has more vehicle dwellers than any other in the country. Cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, and Oakland have become testing grounds for aggressive new policies. Since 2023, more than 40 California cities have passed or expanded overnight parking bans. Many restrict parking to just 2 to 4 hours, even in industrial areas. Violations can lead to fines ranging from $75 to $500, with towing fees often exceeding $2,000. Los Angeles alone issued over 35,000 vehicle habitation citations in 2024. San Diego doubled its towing budget to $15 million. San Jose expanded its no overnight zones by 60%. At the state level, lawmakers tied homelessness funding to enforcement cooperation. Cities that clear RV zones receive priority grants for cleanup and infrastructure projects. Fire risk is frequently cited as justification. California reported over 1,400 RV-related fires in 2024, strengthening political support for removals. But housing supply hasn't kept pace with demand. The state is short over 1.2 million affordable housing units. Only 1 in 4 displaced RV residents is offered temporary shelter after removal. For many Californians, living in an RV has shifted from a survival strategy to criminal status almost overnight. The enforcement infrastructure continues expanding while housing alternatives remain scarce. This combination has created a system where working families and displaced individuals face constant citations, mounting debt, and nowhere legal to park. Oregon's RV crisis is shaped by a unique combination of city enforcement and federal land closures. Portland, Eugene, and Medford have expanded anti-camping and vehicle dwelling rules since 2023. Portland alone cleared over 600 encampment sites in 2024, affecting thousands of RV residents. At the same time, federal agencies including the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management began closing long-term vehicle encampments on public land. These areas had served as informal safe zones for years. Between 2023 and 2025, more than 15 major federal sites were shut down across Oregon. Court battles quickly followed. Advocacy groups sued cities over sweep policies, arguing that shelter shortages made enforcement unconstitutional. While some cases temporarily slowed removals, most were eventually dismissed. Oregon spends over $2 billion annually on homelessness, yet only 18% goes toward permanent housing construction. The rest funds emergency response and enforcement operations. Vehicle dwellers now face pressure from both directions. Cities restrict parking in urban areas, while rural federal land is increasingly off-limits. As a result, people are pushed into smaller and more dangerous locations, including areas under bridges, flood zones, and remote highways. Oregon's system doesn't eliminate homelessness. Instead, it redistributes displaced people from one location to another without providing viable alternatives. The constant displacement disrupts employment, healthcare access, and family stability. Many RV residents report moving every few days to avoid citations, creating a cycle of instability that makes it nearly impossible to secure permanent housing or maintain steady work. Washington has become a national battleground over encampment enforcement policies. Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane expanded vehicle dwelling restrictions after 2022. Seattle alone conducted over 1,200 encampment removals in 2024. RV zones were eliminated near schools, parks, and transit hubs. Signs reading, "No parking between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m." multiplied across the city. Enforcement budgets grew rapidly. Seattle spent $22 million on sweeps and towing in 1 year, more than on new shelter beds. Public backlash followed quickly. Advocacy groups pushed legislation to limit removals unless shelter was available. In 2025, lawmakers introduced restrictions on displacement without placement. But cities resisted, arguing that public safety required enforcement flexibility. Washington State Patrol also began targeting long-term RV parking near highways and rest areas, removing hundreds of vehicles from locations previously considered safe. The result is constant movement. Many RV residents must relocate every 48 to 72 hours to avoid tickets and towing. Surveys show that 62% of Washington vehicle dwellers have been displaced more than 5 times in 1 year. This cycle makes stability impossible. People struggle to maintain jobs when they must move constantly. Children miss school. Medical appointments are canceled. The stress of perpetual displacement compounds existing challenges. Washington's enforcement system has created a population in constant motion with no clear path to stability. While cities argue they're addressing public concerns, the displaced residents have nowhere to go. Shelter beds remain scarce, Affordable housing construction lags far behind need, and the gap between enforcement and solutions continues widening. Arizona's approach to RV homelessness is shaped by state-level authority and extreme climate conditions. After court rulings in 2022 and 2023, Arizona expanded its anti-camping and vehicle habitation laws, giving cities stronger legal backing to remove encampments. Phoenix, Mesa, and Tucson now operate large-scale enforcement teams. Phoenix cleared over 1,500 sites in 2024 alone. Heat risk is a major justification officials cite. With summer temperatures regularly exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit, authorities argue that RV camps represent medical emergencies waiting to happen. But displacement actually makes heat exposure worse. After removals, many residents are pushed into desert outskirts with no shade, water, or services. Heat-related deaths among homeless people rose 35% from 2023 to 2025. Arizona also restricted camping on state trust land, eliminating thousands of informal parking spots that had provided refuge. Shelter capacity remains severely limited. Phoenix has beds for only 22% of its homeless population. Without housing alternatives, enforcement pushes people into genuinely life-threatening conditions. The desert environment means survival requires access to air conditioning, water, and shade. When RVs are removed from areas with these resources, residents face immediate danger. Many displaced people attempt to return to urban areas at night, creating a cycle of repeated enforcement. Citations accumulate, fines mount, and the path to stable housing becomes increasingly impossible. Arizona's enforcement system prioritizes removal over solutions. While officials cite safety concerns, the displacement itself creates the dangerous situations authorities claim to prevent. The result is a population trapped between enforcement pressure and environmental hazards with no legal place to exist. Texas doesn't have a single statewide RV policy. Instead, enforcement happens city by city, and it's spreading rapidly across the state. Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio have all expanded vehicle dwelling restrictions since 2023. Austin passed ordinances banning sleeping in vehicles in most residential and commercial zones. Dallas increased towing contracts by 40%. Houston added no overnight districts near major job centers. Texas cities issued over 28,000 camping and vehicle citations in 2024 alone. Unlike some states, Texas provides limited tenant-style protections for vehicle dwellers. Once cited, residents have few legal options or appeal processes available. Rest areas and park and ride lots were once considered safe zones. Now, many prohibit overnight stays entirely. Meanwhile, rents in major Texas cities rose 27% since 2020. Wages rose only 14%. Working families are being priced out of traditional housing and criminalized simultaneously for their survival strategies. Texas's decentralized approach means enforcement expands quietly, one city at a time, until no safe space remains. There's no coordinated state response, no statewide shelter system, and no unified housing strategy. The city-by-city model creates confusion and constant uncertainty. What's legal in one jurisdiction may be criminal in the next. RV residents must navigate a patchwork of local ordinances that change frequently. As enforcement spreads, displaced people move between cities seeking legal parking, only to find new restrictions awaiting them. The lack of statewide coordination means resources aren't pooled and solutions aren't standardized. Each city makes independent decisions, typically prioritizing removal over housing assistance. This fragmented system leaves RV residents with nowhere to turn. Florida's RV homelessness crisis is shaped by tourism economics, hurricanes, and aggressive local enforcement. With over 27 million visitors annually, coastal cities prioritize clean image policies. Miami, Tampa, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale have expanded no camping and no overnight parking zones near beaches, resorts, and downtown districts. Since 2023, Florida cities have conducted more than 900 large-scale encampment sweeps. Miami-Dade County alone cleared over 200 RV clusters in 2 years. In 2024, Florida passed legislation strengthening penalties for public camping, allowing faster removals and higher fines. Some cities now issue citations within just 12 hours of notice. Hurricanes compound the crisis significantly. After Hurricane Ian and subsequent storms, thousands lost traditional housing and moved into RVs. But emergency parking zones closed within weeks of opening. Flooding and storm surges also destroy informal RV areas. Between 2022 and 2025, over 4,000 vehicle dwellers were displaced by storms. Shelter capacity remains severely limited. Florida has beds for only 19% of its homeless population. Many shelters close entirely during hurricane evacuations, leaving displaced people with nowhere to go. As a result, RV residents are pushed inland, away from coastal jobs and services. Many work in tourism, hospitality, and construction industries concentrated near beaches. In Florida, homelessness enforcement is tied directly to tourism revenue. Image protection comes before housing stability. Cities prioritize visitor experience over resident welfare, creating a system where working people who serve the tourism industry cannot afford to live near their jobs and face criminal penalties for parking overnight. The hurricane cycle adds unpredictable displacement, making stability impossible. Georgia's enforcement is driven largely by urban redevelopment priorities. Atlanta leads the state in RV and encampment removals. As new stadiums, tech hubs, and luxury apartments expanded, vehicle dwelling zones systematically disappeared. Between 2022 and 2025, Atlanta cleared over 350 major encampments, displacing thousands of RV residents. Many areas were rezoned for development immediately after sweeps, making return impossible. Georgia law allows cities to restrict camping on public land with extremely limited notice. In some districts, residents receive only 24 hours before removal and towing. Towing contracts grew sharply. Atlanta increased enforcement spending by 45% in 2 years. The state also expanded Highway Patrol Authority to remove long-term parked vehicles near interstates and exit ramps. Hundreds of RVs were removed from roadside zones that had been tolerated for years. Georgia's homeless population grew by 26% since 2020, while affordable housing construction fell by 18%. The gap between need and supply continues widening. Shelter beds are concentrated in downtown areas. Suburban zones offer almost no alternatives for displaced residents. When sweeps happen, people are pushed farther from public transit, healthcare facilities, and employment centers. Georgia's approach reflects a larger national trend: development first, displacement second, housing solutions last. The economic priorities of real estate development take precedence over human needs. As Atlanta positions itself as a growing tech and business hub, the pressure on low-income residents intensifies. RV dwellers represent visible poverty in areas targeted for upscale transformation. Their removal serves aesthetic and economic goals rather than addressing the underlying housing crisis that created vehicle homelessness in the first place. Colorado's RV enforcement is driven by climate concerns and tourism economics. Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, and mountain resort towns have expanded restrictions on vehicle dwelling since 2023. Denver alone removed over 1,000 vehicle encampments in 2024. Boulder banned overnight parking in most zones, reducing legal parking options by 70%. Officials cite wildfire risk, propane storage dangers, and blocked snow routes as reasons for removals. Winter plowing access is frequently used to justify emergency clearing operations, but displacement creates severe cold exposure risks. In winter 2024, temperatures dropped below -15 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of Colorado. Homeless outreach teams recorded a 41% increase in hypothermia cases following major sweeps. Many RV residents are pushed into high-altitude areas without electrical hookups or water access. Heating fuel costs can exceed $200 per month, completely unaffordable for most vehicle dwellers. Tourism also drives enforcement. Ski towns restrict RV parking to preserve visitor experience and maintain upscale aesthetics. Seasonal bans are common in resort areas. Colorado spends over $450 million annually on homelessness programs, yet less than 30% goes toward long-term housing construction. The rest funds enforcement operations and emergency response. In mountain states like Colorado, displacement often means survival against nature itself. Sub-zero temperatures turn enforcement into a potential death sentence for those without shelter alternatives. The mountain environment makes vehicle living particularly dangerous. Altitude increases cold stress, snow restricts movement, and emergency services may be hours away. When enforcement removes RVs from urban areas with some infrastructure, people face immediate survival challenges in harsh conditions with no support systems. Nevada's enforcement is heavily concentrated around Las Vegas and Reno. Las Vegas hosts over 40 million tourists annually, making image control central to policy decisions. Clark County expanded no habitation zones around the Strip, stadiums, and convention centers. RV parking within miles of major venues is completely prohibited overnight. Since 2023, Las Vegas removed over 2,500 vehicles from public areas. Reno followed a similar path, clearing riverfront and industrial zones to attract development and investment. Nevada law allows rapid enforcement for public nuisance violations. Removal notices can be as short as 24 hours, giving residents almost no time to relocate or challenge citations. Water scarcity is also cited as justification. Officials argue that unauthorized RV settlements strain limited infrastructure in the desert environment. But Nevada's shelter system is one of the smallest per capita in the western United States. Only 16% of homeless residents can access shelter beds on any given night. Desert relocation dramatically increases health risks. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Vehicle interiors reach lethal levels within hours. Heat-related deaths among the homeless in Clark County rose 38% between 2022 and 2025. Nevada's tourism economy directly drives policy decisions, and RV residents pay the price with their health and safety. The casino and convention industries generate billions in revenue. Officials prioritize maintaining an upscale image for visitors, while the workers who support that economy cannot afford housing. Enforcement removes visible poverty from tourist corridors, but offers no alternative housing, creating a population constantly displaced in one of America's most dangerous climates. Utah's enforcement reflects a combination of conservative governance and severely limited housing stock. Salt Lake City, Provo, and Ogden expanded anti-camping and vehicle-dwelling laws after 2023. Overnight parking is now banned in most residential and commercial zones. Salt Lake City cleared over 600 encampments in 2024 alone, many involving RVs and other vehicles. Utah emphasizes what officials call compassionate enforcement, offering shelter before removal. But capacity is extremely low. The state has beds for only 21% of its homeless population. Many shelters are faith-based, requiring participation in religious programs and services. Some RV residents decline these requirements, leaving them ineligible for the limited assistance available. Housing costs have risen dramatically. Since 2020, rents increased 31%, while median income rose only 13%. The gap between wages and housing costs continues widening. Utah also restricts long-term parking near churches, schools, and government buildings, eliminating traditional safe zones where RVs had previously been tolerated. Winter adds additional pressure. Sub-zero temperatures push authorities to clear camps for safety reasons, even without housing alternatives. Officials argue they're protecting people from freezing, but displacement often increases exposure to dangerous cold. Utah's system relies heavily on moral framing, encouraging compliance without providing enough actual exits from homelessness. The religious influence shapes both the rhetoric and the limited services available. The result is polite displacement, repeated endlessly. Authorities use compassionate language while implementing policies that create constant movement. The emphasis on personal responsibility and faith-based solutions cannot address the structural housing shortage that drives vehicle homelessness in the first place. Idaho's enforcement expanded rapidly after national court rulings weakened legal protections for homeless residents. Cities like Boise, Meridian, and Nampa passed stricter anti-camping and vehicle habitation ordinances between 2023 and 2025. Boise alone issued over 4,800 camping and vehicle citations in 2024. Before these legal changes, riverbanks, industrial zones, and public lands served as informal RV parking areas. Most of these locations have now been closed to overnight use. State land agencies increased patrols by 32%, specifically targeting long-term vehicle dwellers on trust land and wildlife management areas. Idaho's homeless population grew by 29% since 2020, while affordable housing construction dropped by 21%. The gap between need and supply continues expanding. Shelter capacity remains severely limited. Only 17% of unhoused residents can access beds on any given night. Cold weather is a major factor in Idaho's crisis. Winter temperatures frequently fall below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Outreach teams recorded a 36% increase in frostbite and cold-related injuries immediately following major sweeps. Rural displacement is common. When Boise clears RV zones, many residents relocate to remote highways and forest edges where emergency services are scarce or non-existent. Idaho's approach emphasizes law and order over housing investment, leaving RV residents with fewer legal and physical safe spaces each year. The court rulings gave cities broader authority to remove encampments without providing shelter alternatives first. Idaho quickly exercised this authority, implementing aggressive enforcement while shelter construction lagged far behind. The combination of legal changes, harsh winter climate, and limited housing options creates life-threatening situations for displaced vehicle dwellers. Michigan's RV homelessness crisis is tied directly to long-term industrial decline and rising housing costs. Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids, and Lansing have expanded enforcement using parking codes and nuisance laws rather than direct anti-camping bans. Detroit issued more than 6,200 parking and habitation citations in 2024 specifically targeting vehicle dwellers. Grand Rapids increased towing operations by 28%. Officials frame removals as neighborhood protection and blight reduction rather than homelessness enforcement, using legal language that avoids constitutional challenges. But economic reality tells a different story. Since 2020, Michigan rents increased 24%, while manufacturing wages rose only 11%. Thousands of laid-off auto workers and warehouse employees turned to vehicles for housing. Winter is deadly in Michigan. The state recorded over 90 cold-related deaths among unhoused residents between 2023 and 2025. Many RV residents cluster near factories and logistics hubs to maintain employment access. When these zones are cleared through parking enforcement, people lose both shelter and job proximity simultaneously. Shelter availability is extremely limited outside Detroit. Rural counties often have 0 emergency beds available. Michigan spends less than 0.4% of its state budget on homelessness programs, among the lowest rates in the Midwest region. As a result, enforcement far outpaces assistance. Cities remove RVs faster than housing solutions can develop. The industrial decline that drove Michigan's economic struggles continues impacting working families. Manufacturing job losses created initial housing instability, and parking code enforcement criminalizes the survival strategies people adopted. Without addressing the economic roots or investing in housing, Michigan's approach simply moves poverty from one location to another. Pennsylvania's RV enforcement is concentrated in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and surrounding suburbs. Philadelphia cleared over 450 encampments in 2024, many involving vehicle dwellers. Parking restrictions expanded dramatically around transit corridors and redevelopment zones. SEPTA and city police increased patrols near train stations, removing long-term parked RVs to maintain what officials call commuter safety and station aesthetics. Pittsburgh followed similar policies, especially near hospitals, universities, and medical district expansion areas. Between 2022 and 2025, parking-related citations specifically targeting vehicle residents rose 41% statewide. Housing costs are rising rapidly across Pennsylvania. Rents increased 26% since 2020, while median wages rose only 14%. The gap continues widening each year. At the same time, the state lost over 9,000 public housing units due to aging infrastructure and lack of maintenance funding. Shelters are severely overcrowded. Philadelphia's average shelter occupancy exceeds 96% year-round, leaving almost no availability for newly displaced people. Suburban counties provide few alternatives, forcing displaced residents to return to cities repeatedly. Many RV dwellers work in healthcare, food service, and logistics industries. Displacement disrupts not only housing, but employment arrangements and childcare access. Pennsylvania's transit-focused enforcement prioritizes mobility infrastructure and commercial activity over housing security. The emphasis on clearing areas near public transportation means people lose access to the very transit systems they need for work. Pushing RVs away from stations forces longer commutes or complete job loss. The transit-oriented approach reflects broader priorities. Economic activity and commuter convenience take precedence over the housing needs of working poor residents who often serve those same transit-dependent commuters. Ohio's enforcement relies heavily on public safety and health codes rather than direct camping bans. Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton expanded nuisance and sanitation ordinances between 2023 and 2025. Columbus removed over 700 encampments in 2024 alone. Cleveland increased vehicle towing by 34%, specifically targeting RVs and converted vans. Cities cite trash accumulation, fire risk, and flooding concerns along riverbanks and highway underpasses as primary justifications for enforcement. But Ohio's housing shortage is severe. The state lacks over 260,000 affordable housing units, creating impossible pressure on low-income residents. Rents rose 23% since 2020, while wages rose only 12%. The income gap makes traditional housing increasingly unattainable. Many displaced RV residents move constantly between industrial zones, rest areas, and abandoned parking lots, seeking any temporary refuge. Flooding is a major risk in Ohio. In 2025, heavy rains displaced over 1,200 homeless residents along Ohio River corridors, destroying vehicles and belongings. Shelter coverage remains extremely low. Only 20% of homeless residents can access beds on any given night. Ohio's system emphasizes compliance and cleanup operations without addressing root causes of homelessness. The result is constant movement with no pathway out of vehicle dwelling. Health code enforcement sounds less punitive than camping bans, but achieves the same displacement effect. By framing enforcement as public health protection rather than homeless removal, cities avoid constitutional challenges while achieving the same goal. RV residents face citations regardless of legal terminology. The emphasis on sanitation and safety allows cities to clear areas quickly while claiming to protect both housed residents and the displaced population itself. North Carolina's RV homelessness crisis is driven by rapid population growth and restrictive zoning laws. Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, and Asheville expanded parking and camping bans after 2023. Overnight parking is prohibited in most suburban zones. Charlotte cleared over 300 encampments in 2024 alone. Raleigh doubled enforcement staffing to handle increased sweep operations. As tech sector and finance jobs expanded, housing costs surged dramatically. Rents increased 29% since 2020, while entry-level wages rose only 13%. Zoning laws severely restrict mobile home parks and RV parks, limiting legal alternatives for low-income residents. North Carolina lost over 40% of its low-cost trailer parks since 2000 due to redevelopment pressure. Hurricane displacement also plays a significant role. Storms in eastern counties pushed thousands into temporary RV living as emergency housing. But emergency parking zones closed within months, leaving displaced families with nowhere to go. Shelter capacity is extremely uneven across the state. Rural counties often have zero emergency beds available. As cities grow wealthier through job growth and development, physical space for low-income residents systematically disappears. North Carolina's enforcement reflects a broader pattern: economic growth without inclusion. The jobs created don't pay enough for workers to afford housing in the same cities where they're employed. The rapid transformation means longtime residents and service workers are priced out simultaneously. Zoning restrictions prevent affordable housing development, while enforcement removes the survival strategies people adopted. The combination creates a population with stable employment, but no legal place to live. Economic growth enriches some while criminalizing others, with RV enforcement serving as the mechanism that removes visible poverty from prosperous areas. This isn't homelessness anymore. It's a slow-motion eviction of the working class. If you've seen this happening in your city, tell us in the comments. And don't miss our next video, where we expose which states are expanding these crackdowns even further.